In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we acknowledge the town of Edson is located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral lands of the Niqawaks, Saulteaux, Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, Dene, Nakota Sioux, and the Tippemisiwak Métis Nation. We honor the knowledge of this land, the elders and youth which gather here, and our ancestors who have gathered here for centuries. Can I get a motion, please, for the agenda of the December 12th special meeting of council? Councillor Chenard, would you like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion for the special meeting.
Councillor Chenard, all those in favor? That motion is carried. We have reports from administration, and we'll put the motion on the floor, and then we'll hear from our General Manager of Community and Protective Services. Can I get a motion, please, that Council adopt the extreme cold emergency warming center protocol as presented? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, and we'll hand things off to Mr. Doug Wagstaff, General Manager of Community and Protective Services. Go ahead, Mr. Wagstaff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To begin, we do have a short presentation to make with regards to the warming center. Just want to be clear again for the public that may be listening today what an emergency warming center in this proposal is about. It's a heated trailer to act as a warming location for overnight. It is not what a shelter. It is not lodging. It is not a mat program. It's not a replacement for the shelter pods or anything similar to what the shelter pods had operated like previously. It only operates in the evening once a threshold of minus 20 degrees Celsius, including a wind chill, has occurred in a forecast. Yeah, sorry, did I not say minus 25 degrees Celsius? I apologize, at minus 25 degrees Celsius. And it does not operate during the daytime. It is closed during the daytime and fully secured when it is inactive. The location that we are proposing with this today, after deliberation from Council and returning back and looking at the many locations that we had looked at previously, we have cited a location just west of the provincial building, east of the RCMP station, in the vicinity of First Avenue. It's not lined up directly at the end of First Avenue, so that there is no unintentional traffic to come off that would go into it. It is offset from First Avenue. What we have looked at for the advantages of this location is it is on town land. That is one of the principles that we wanted to maintain. It's near the RCMP detachment for the ease of patrols, just a natural coming and going of members so that they can keep an eye on it while they're on patrol in the evening. Also, if they need to respond in any fashion, it's in close proximity for quick response. There are no residential properties nearby, and the support services for the individuals that are homeless are within that vicinity of walking distance for them currently. And they also currently are in that proximity of the area, so they're comfortable in that area. One of the disadvantages that we have identified is there is an early childhood program that operates out of the provincial building during the day, and that is some of the evaluation that we went through for this location. The site itself is approximately 40 by 40 feet. It would be fenced in. Any generator and lighting that we bring in will also be fenced in the interior of the site. 2 warming trailers will be placed in there, electrical heat provided to those trailers. There would also be 2 portable washrooms on site, so those are the typical construction washrooms, porta potties as commonly known, and garbage cans located on the inside. There would be parking spaces just off on the outside where the security personnel that are monitoring the site would be able to be parked at and monitor the site. This is what we are looking at. Just to give you a visual, they are like a construction site office. And so it would be this style of a trailer that would be, 2 of those would be placed on the site. The operations, again, it's only available from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. on nights that have been forecasted with minus 25 degrees Celsius. It would be supervised by a security contractor that has trained personnel in dealing with vulnerable persons, and they would monitor the use of the facility. They would also do regular wellness checks, up to 4 an hour throughout the night, and contact emergency services if required. Again, should an individual become violent or non-responsive, the RCMP and emergency services, as appropriate, would be called. If that security firm was unable to be present, we would not open this operation. That is under the both our capacity with our staff and under the advice of our insurer, that as our staff are not trained in this type of operation, the advice was to do that with those who do have that kind of training. Again, the security staff would remain on site and monitor throughout the evening and ensure that the facility is locked at 8 a.m. We would have our enforcement staff meet them at 8 a.m. to ensure that it is locked, from a town perspective and cleared. Again, at 8 a.m., the individuals who may have stayed there for the evening are required to vacate the premises. And the RCMP, in consultation with the detachment, as part of their patrols through the community, they would ensure that there's routine patrols of this area as well. That is the overview of what has been presented in the RFD presented to Council today.
Thank you, Mr. Wagstaff, for your presentation and for all the staff involved in bringing up this revised proposal to Council here tonight. So we will open the floor to questions to Council. If you have any questions, please queue up now. We will go to Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Wagstaff. So how long are individuals allowed to stay in the warming trailer, and what is the capacity at any one time?
Through the mayor to council, the capacity of each trailer is about 13 persons. And I say about because if there's chairs in there, which we are able to have, that can be 13. If there are no chairs in there, it can be as high as 17. We do intend on having at least somewhere for them to sit with a chair inside. So the capacity of the 2 trailers is between 20 and 36. They would be in there, they could be in there anytime between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. during the evenings that it's open.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor to soon to be administration. When I have some questions, I'm going to give some comments first, and so to council and the gallery, people watching at home. I know this has been a bit of a contentious issue in terms of last week and bringing it back tonight, and that's of course the bigger issue of homelessness. And what we're dealing with now, what our community is dealing with now, is something that lots of communities are dealing with, and that smaller municipalities haven't generally dealt with. And what we're dealing with now is kind of I'd say a perfect storm. We're in a post-COVID world. Things are a little different. Housing prices and rent prices have skyrocketed. We've seen kind of decades of inaction of dealing with mental health and now addictions with fentanyl running essentially rampant and being readily available. Now we're having to deal with these types of things at a municipal level. And this is something relatively new for our municipality, but I'm happy to see that we're doing something. We have to do something. So, and I want to thank administration for bringing this back and taking our comments from last week into this week. Obviously, the location, I am supportive of the location. We look at corridors and things. We talk about crimes of necessity, where sort of unhoused people might go at night to the trailers, where they might go during the day to other agencies, and that was alluded to in the RFD, was you're lessening that corridor where you might see issues, right? If you make sort of the warming area perhaps on the other area of town, that corridor gets a lot longer and we end up having more issues. So thank you for addressing the staff and the time. I thought I'm supportive that our staff are not manning it, that we are getting a third party. I understand there's a cost to that, but there's a overall safety that we have to consider as well. Mentioned in the RFD, obviously, and we talked about this last week, about another party perhaps being able to set something up that doesn't look like it will be happening this year, but working on the peripheral, that perhaps that can be set up for next winter, and then that takes the heat off our municipality in terms of doing it. But there's more to come on that. We'll have to see in the coming weeks and months how that all progresses. Other comments, I had mentioned last week too about the location, and I do have to say this. I had mentioned about the Sandy dump being a possible location. In the interim, in the last week, I've had great conversation with the gymnastics club that is there, and they addressed lots of their concerns, and I do want to thank them for bringing those concerns to me and having a great conversation about that. And anybody who contacted me, very positive discussion about this whole issue. Getting on to sort of the question, and my question is going to be actually to, if possible, to Staff Sergeant Delisle and Chief Milton that are here tonight. If we don't proceed with this, if we decided that the $55,000 that we're looking at is too expensive, what kinds of things do you think will happen in the interim? We talk about crimes of necessity, crimes of survival, like what kinds of things would we encounter if we didn't provide this trailer, in terms of from an RCMP perspective and from a fire department perspective?
Maybe we can bring some chairs up so you guys can sit down. Go ahead. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Delisle and Chief Milton, for being here tonight. Staff Sergeant Delisle, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So good question. To be quite honest, I don't have a definite answer either. Having working with the homeless population many years, been part of the pod program and whatnot, they have always surprised me on how they can be resourceful. So that's kind of positive, where they can find sometimes solution and help themselves to not, freeze or things like this. But on the other side too, like sometimes, putting up measures and trying to set up programs to help them and how they can circumvent and create things. So I don't have a definite answer, although there's a high risk of, if we look at wintertime, is people freezing. So that would be our fear. And usually to try and, through their resourcefulness, sometimes they will use illegal means to find a warm place. So we hear about like banks, hotel lobbies, apartment building lobbies, places like this. So without a place where they know they could go, we could see a certain increase of that, or a certain increase of little mischiefs where they need to break something to get into like a warm location or a shelter. So in terms of policing, that's what we could see, yes. I'll leave the rest of the answer for...
Thank you, through the chair, to all of council. I would, for the fire response or emergency services response, I would say I wouldn't have a definite answer on what the increase or decrease we may see with this program. One thing that could be noted is the potential for increased fires. Those would be fires of necessity, trying to stay warm, whether it's an outbuilding. The other thing with that is we've seen some of this in some of the encampments in Alberta to date, with various methods being used to try to stay warm, and that's causing some of these fires that we've seen. Otherwise, the other side of this is obviously the fact of somebody freezing and receiving those medical calls and responses to frostbite, hypothermia, stuff like that.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, so, and taking those comments, through the mayor, taking those comments, whether we're spending the money on this or we're spending money on the calls, right? And I think at the end of the day, we're better suited to spend money on this emergency shelter than to sort of utilize all of our resources, RCMP bylaw, fire department, emergency services, on all of those, what could be very trivial calls and that tie up a lot of our resources and things like that, or very serious calls that involve death. This is the better solution. So thank you, gentlemen, for your candor here tonight.
There might be some more questions for you guys if you wouldn't mind hanging around. Council, any further questions regarding this issue or comments? Councillor Pasichny.
Yeah, through the chair to Staff Sergeant Jalile. I'm directing a question at you just because you've been in the community longer than Chief Milton. I guess the quick question is, were you around when we had a trailer last time?
Not the one at the airport. The trailer that we had at the recycling depot before the pods, I was around, yes.
Okay, then, and maybe through your staff, were the trailers successful when the trailers were used? I know we had limited success with the pods. And I don't want to, this number's jumped tremendously. And to me, that's a huge number now. And I will struggle personally with spending taxpayers' money on something that one, maybe two people go in. Because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if anybody who's on the task force can correct me, my understanding is a lot of them don't get along and they don't want to be in the same space together. And that's where the pods having 5 was a simpler solution. And then it became what it wasn't supposed to be. And maybe I'm just looking for the professional guidance here of, you were a part of the pod program, you saw how that worked, and you saw the trailer, as you say, from the recycling depot, and what was a better solution back then?
No, and what you're bringing to the table is accurate. If I go back to, if I start with, like, was the trailer successful? It really depends on your definition of success. So I will say, was it successful? Yes, because some people used it when it was very cold. So we probably prevented someone to get frostbite or freezing to death or a crime by breaking into a shed or something like that. Now, how many did we prevent? It's kind of hard to tell. The average numbers of people that we saw in the trailer, probably 5 at the time at most, because you're right, there's some factions and there's some people that don't like to hang out with other people, and depends on who gets there first, right? They're all of a sudden, it's their like territory for the night. But I still believe that, when we're talking temperatures of minus 25 and whatnot, we have to have a place at least where they have a choice. They can make the choice to go. Now, if I compare with the pods were maybe a little bit more successful because they were addressing or helping more people in a sense where, yeah, we had 5. They were supposed to be for single use. I know it was the COVID era, but, when you think about it, I don't think that anybody in a pod, warm pod, when your friend knocks at the door and it's minus 20, that it'll leave them outside. So it was helping maybe 2, sometimes 3 people per pod. So we were probably seeing a bigger number at the pods. Now this initiative is bringing 2 trailers, so we can have maybe 4 or 5 in one, 4 or 5 in the other one. So we might see a better usage of the trailer. Now yet to be seen, of course, but it's really depending on your definition of success. I think it's worth it, even with sometimes the difficulties that a single trailer can bring, because now there's no way to lock a door behind you and having a safe environment, like you have other people around there. Sometimes that can bring some conflict, even for the numbers of calls that we were getting for that and the numbers of people that were using it. I think it was worth it. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chenard.
The first question through, how long is this going to take to get set up? Because you're saying building of fans, moving in trailers, so what kind of a time frame is my first question.
Go ahead, Mr. Wagstaff.
Through the mayor to council, within 5 to 10 days is the anticipated time for us to be able to set and have it operational.
Okay, can I do a second?
Go ahead, Councillor Chenard.
My other one is I'm struggling with the costs, because even when we did the first one, it wasn't a success. The pods were somewhat of a success. So I'm really struggling with the idea we could spend up to $50,000, maybe, and I get it, we're saved 2 or 3 people. So the cost of it, so the city of Edmonton right now, and I'm putting it on the province, got trailers supplied to them paid by the province. So from my saying, I don't want to spend this money, so if other towns did the same as us, because I've said for many times, this is a higher government, it is the provincial government or the federal government's problem. They keep downloading on us because we have hearts, we're conscious, but I'm really struggling with the cost for 2 or 3 people. At that time, maybe we can load them up, bring them to another place, because a lot of these people need treatment centers, not enable them to say, you know what, I can keep living on the streets because we're going to keep them warm. And that's the problem I have. It's been a warm year, and if we keep enabling them to keep them comfortable, this could be a problem. Maybe we got to have a little bit of tough love and say, you know what, guys, there is treatment centers, get it. So that's where I'm struggling supporting this.
Councillor Byer.
Thanks. Through the chair to, I guess, to council and administration. So from my recollection of when we had the trailers before, as was mentioned, there was only one room, and we didn't know at the time that they wouldn't all get along, and it was in a location that was not near their services. And as Staff Sergeant Delisle alluded to with when the trailer was on the recycling depot, there was some success. And if you define success as having the facility utilized, the shelter pods were a great success. I think they were utilized every single night that they were open, almost to max capacity plus more, for what they were, I guess, intended for. I think they were very well utilized, maybe too much from the community's perspective because they were lingering, and there were other challenges there. I was pleased to see that administration has 2 trailers for that reason, because we know that one trailer was not that it had challenges to it. The vulnerable population, I think we've all known people who have had sheds broken into, garages, vehicles, because they're trying to find that safe place to escape to. I don't like spending taxpayers' money on this either when I think the province can pay for it, but I don't want to see people's sheds and vehicles and garages broken into either. If there's an opportunity to find this safe location for them to be warm, and they don't all get along, but having 2 trailers I think is extremely helpful with that. And also the security part. When we had the trailers before, I don't recall having a security firm involved at all. And there's been indications that the shelter pods were successful because those that felt vulnerable to the other members of the group, they were able to lock that door behind them and have that secure location, including for females, right, as you can imagine. And I think having the security there is a part of that success. It will encourage them to go there instead of those other locations in our community that we don't want them to be at, breaking into in the middle of the night. And so with that, I'm pleased to see the changes that were made here and identified last week. So I think that this is the most reasonable way to do this. But I do have a question for administration, and that's just regarding the provincial grant. Do you have any details on those parameters, or I know it was supposed to include many different services that a municipality itself doesn't generally get into, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to that and why we're not eligible.
Go ahead, Mr. Wagstaff.
Through the mayor to council, it's not that we would not be eligible. It's a different level of service that would be required to get that funding. So that would require social services and expertise on site through the night. That would have to be acquired, either hired or volunteered, willing to do that on a consistent basis. There also would be a MAT programs where they have it becomes a sleeping facility. That's what's required in the provincial funding. So it's not that we're not eligible. It's a higher level of service. It would require a greater amount of our staff time for taking away from the other duties that they are doing. And then it also included, at that point, our insurer had indicated that having our staff involved without that proper training is problematic. And so that would require more resources for us to be hired out in order to hit that level of funding from the province.
CO Beveridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to council. In addition, it would require them to be open every day for the winter. That's a key component within that grant program.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Through the chair to whoever could answer this, the security people or persons who will be looking after this, would they be trained as well in mental health procedures?
Go ahead, Mr. Wagstaff.
Through the mayor to Councillor Moore. They're not trained mental health professionals, but they are trained to deal with vulnerable populations. The firms that we have engaged for quotes and inquired about their availability and what they had to offer have experience in dealing with vulnerable populations in Edmonton, and that's what they train their personnel for.
Councillor Bevan.
Through the chair, I like where you guys are going with this and that, you know, and I do agree with the 2 trailers and stuff like that. And I know that other communities that have some families and relatives in, they have problems with them too in that, and they struggle with the price of putting them up too, but they've gone ahead and put them up because I agree with them that, you know, if you don't do it and we have somebody freeze to death and that, I mean, and we turned it down for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. I mean, that's just not what, you know, you sign on to do. You look after a population, whether they're transient here or they live here. Most of them live here year-round anyway and that. So I agree the provincial government should be stepping up and helping us more in that, but it's not going to happen. I mean, we've been going around with this I've been on council for, 10 years now, 11 years, and it's still not going around it. So, I mean, either we do it right now and we see how it works out for this year and see what it looks like for next year and that. But I think, you know, if we can save somebody's life that doesn't freeze out there and that, you know, that's a win-win for us and that too. It is a lot of money, but I think, you know, we have to seriously say, you know, let's give it a shot.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor, and I just, to Councillor Chouinard and your comment earlier about that providing this service is perhaps a form of enabling. I just want to be clear on this. This trailer is just a heated trailer. There's no food, there's no shower facilities, no toiletries, other than the porta potty. This is not enabling. This is just so that people don't get hurt and don't die. This is the basic thing that we can provide. So I don't believe this is a form of enabling. This is just so that we can keep people alive and we don't have an extraordinary number of calls that don't need to happen. So, and I know, Councillor Chouinard, you made that comment, but I've seen other comments like that throughout the community. This is not enabling. This is just providing so that people don't get hurt. And that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Pasicny.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor to administration. I'm just going to be bluntly honest that I'm really struggling with costs, because when I look at the comment on in our documentation saying the shelter pods be a substantially higher budget, but when I think about the shelter pods, they're existing. So, like, there's no trailer mobilization. There's no utilities. There's utilities on site already. There's cameras on site already. Really, and if you put the same level of just the security people in place, which we may not need because it's a different style of place, our costs would be in the $14,000 range, not the $54,000 range. So maybe can you explain to me, other than insurance, and have we explored, maybe further to this, have we explored a third party supporting them in operating it as we have done in the past? And I'm not saying the same one before, I'm just saying a third party or an organization or a task force or somebody else, because there was a time that it was working, and definitely not at the cost that we're seeing for these trailers. And this is a lot of taxpayers' money for something that I think we already we were praised nationally for having these pods. Even at our federal conferences, they praised us for coming up with an ingenious idea, and here we are just abandoning it to go back to the system we started with that didn't work. So maybe explain to me why the costs are exponential, and why it would be so much more money to operate something that already exists versus bringing in, creating a bunch of infrastructure.
Go ahead, Mr. Wagstaff.
So part of the evaluation of the pods is when we took the principles of we were trying to maintain that we were limiting the amount of disruption to the immediate area of businesses and residential, as well as trying to find a location where there was as minimal amount of interaction that didn't have a choice but to interact with the area. That's one of the pieces with the pods in their location. It is closer to some of the businesses, and the fencing would still need to be required in order to control it. Also, our insurer had some concerns about the monitoring of that type of location because they are locked. It is more safer they might feel more safe, as we heard from Staff Sergeant Delisle. But then the access to it, our insurer indicated that we needed to take measures have in place with trained personnel that would be able to do checks with social welfare, not just the security side of it. So there is an additional level that we would be required to have there. Also, the time for our staff being involved there to coordinate the access to the pods. There is still that part that we need to monitor the use, that it becomes a sleeping piece. It's not just a warming, it becomes a shelter. And so that was part of our evaluation of the why we were not recommending the use of the pods.
Thank you, Mr. Wagstaff. Go ahead, CO Beveridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Precision and the rest of council. Additionally, the town doesn't own the pods. Negotiation, there would be a cost potentially. We haven't investigated this because of our insurer. To be fair, the insurer really steered us away with regards to the pods because they were locked, and the in and out privileges that would be required, that we would have to limit the in and out privileges. I'll be clear on that. They also only house 5 people if you're going back to only the principles behind the pods in the outset. So, when it comes to investigating whether or not they would have been cheaper, if you will, the negotiation with regards to the pods, because the town simply owns the land that the pods are placed on, and that's it. So at this time, with the time from the meeting last week to this week, further exploration with regards to that negotiation did not occur, but they were discounted for reasons of the additional level of service that was being provided, that they were turning into a shelter, versus the principles behind this was simply for a warming shelter and a warming center, shall I say.
Thank you. Councillor Chenard.
Okay, just to do a follow-up, how I mean enabling, homelessness in Edson is not new. For over 40 years, I've seen homeless people. My thing is, the more you do, the numbers are increasing. So when we're saying pods, trust me, they go, oh my God, Edson's doing something for us. So that's what I mean by enabling. It's not new. The homeless people have been around. The more you do, the more they come. I do have a heart, so I'm saying that if you are freezing, we need to help you. Even if it costs us an ambulance trip, a police car, whatever it takes, load them in buses, get them some help. Because if we continue to, and I'm going to stress the word enable them, to continue, because if they have a choice, if I continue down this path and people have different addictions, different reasons, but as long as we are not doing them any favors, I don't want to see anyone die, but if we do someone freezing, let's load them up, let's get them some help. Because if we keep helping them survive in the elements, we're doing them zero favors.
Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor to Councillor Precision as well, and I think there was some allusions to this, is that if we did want to go to the pods, the recycle depot would have to be on board. And my understanding is they just want to stick to recycling. And that's what they want to do.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any further questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Byram.
Thanks. Through the chair to administration, I know there's 2 motions. We just have one on the floor right now, but they are certainly blended. And it was, I'm just looking through it. It's regarding where it was funded from, to be funded from the recreation and admin contract.
Councillor Byer, I think we should stick to the first motion and then discuss that piece when the second motion moves on to the floor, if that would be okay? Sure. All right, sounds good. Any further questions regarding the emergency warming center protocol as presented? So I haven't had a chance to speak on this, and contrary to what some of the commentary online was that I was hiding last week, no, I was actually away with my family, finally got away. So I was not able to be here at the meeting last week, and appreciate the people that did reach out to share their thoughts and opinions, and I agree with a lot of the opinions that were shared in regards to the location that was brought forward last week. I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. The challenge with something like this is that there's never an ideal location, and it's a very complex and challenging issue. And there's some history here why we went down the path of providing a warming shelter, and I don't think that's been clearly explained. So I would like to explain that. A number of years ago, we set up what was called the Health Partnership Team, and it was members of our healthcare community, the site manager at the Edson Hospital at the time, myself, the mayor of the county, I believe MLA Long was involved, his office was involved in some of the meetings as well. And we talked about healthcare in the region and what the challenges were. And the biggest challenge that was identified, every meeting we discussed healthcare, and it came down to the vulnerable population and the amount of resources that it was taking in our ER, with people showing up with frozen toes, showing up to hospital because it was the only way they could keep warm in the wintertime, the ambulance calls, people ending up at the hospital, getting let out, and no means to get to where they needed to go. And I can speak to this as a member of Citizens on Patrol, because I was on patrol that night. It was a minus 40-degree night. The police received a call from the hospital that there was an unhoused individual that needed a way to get to a hotel. He actually had a hotel room, but that hotel room was straight across town, and if he tried to walk, he would have froze to death. It was cold that night. The police were really tied up with some very serious calls that evening, and they're not a taxi service. And this person didn't have the money for a taxi. And at the time, and I can't speak about now, there was no ability to have a taxi sheet, get a taxi for this individual. And so our group stepped up and we paid for a taxi to get this individual to a hotel, and he was safe that night. There's other individuals that don't have any ability to do that. They suffer from mental health. They suffer from FASD. It's not as simple as putting up in a hotel room. They can't function in those areas. So when we talked about this, and we talked about how many calls they were getting at the ER when it got really cold outside, and people losing toes, people have died on the streets of Edson and Yellowhead County, have froze to death just a couple years ago. There was unfortunately an individual that passed away. They were found in a shed. This is about saving lives, and you can't put a cost on that. I'm sorry. It's not about enabling. You're enabling people when you do everything for them, when you don't try to get them the help. Some of these individuals, and I know there's going to be a group of people out there that might take this video clip and use it. You're not going to solve their issues. Unfortunately, with the challenges that they have, you're not going to fix it. You know, they've come from traumatic events. They may have FASD, other issues, and unfortunately, they're on the streets. They have no resources. They don't have the ability to care for themselves, but they have rights, so the police can't really do anything until they actually break the law, break a window on Main Street, so they can end up in jail to stay warm for the night. We've had a landfill fire in this community. We don't talk about that too much. It cost us millions of dollars. Now, we can't prove that it was an unhoused individual, but we know that we had fires started by unhoused individuals there over the years. And guess what? It cost this municipality big time. We get calls for service out in the forests. We have encampments. We've all got the calls, and people end up with tents behind people's homes in the trails. That's going to happen if we don't have a place for them to go. It's gonna be seniors apartments building. Seniors scared because there is somebody that may be manic depressive, maybe bipolar, may have some other issues, may be high in those buildings. In people's sheds, vehicles, plugging into private properties. I'm going on a bit of rant here because we've talked about this year after year after year, and it's a frustrating file. I don't want to spend money on this either. I'm a taxpayer. I don't want to have to spend money, but at the end of the day, this is about saving lives, period. It's not about anything more than that. And when you move to the provincial protocol, you're now providing more services, and that's probably a good thing because then you can get that help. You can maybe get them into facilities, but they have to make the choice they want to do that. And I understand there's a lot of things in the works to make that more available to people. That's not what we're looking at here. That's a whole different can of worms. This is just basically when it's minus 30, because I can guarantee you when it's minus 30 and people see people outside with no place to go, we're going to be getting the calls because we had that one winter. And we've been very fortunate this year that we haven't had the cold weather. So anybody involved in this file, the social agencies that provide these supports on a day-to-day basis, they know the challenges, and it's not an easy thing. So at the end of the day, it's all about shelter, food, clothing. Those are the basic necessities of life. And we often talk about the unhoused people, that they all have mental health, they all have addictions issues. That's not always the case. There are people that end up losing their place to stay. They may be in a domestic violence situation, may have no money, no place to go. They may be looking for a place. And if they end up, or maybe they're traveling through town, they have no money, and their car breaks down. At least the police will then have a place to, if we can't get them into a hotel. And I know this is the case in the wintertime because I've talked to officers that they'll see somebody wandering around. They would take them over to that shelter so they would stay warm that night. I'm certainly in support of doing something. I don't want to go down the road of providing all kinds of services and all kinds of staff time. That's not our area of expertise. It absolutely is not. And I'm glad this isn't near a school, and I'm glad this is in an area that is highly visible. And so I will be supportive of it. We have had money set aside before, and I will talk about that in the next motion. But at the end of the day, it's about saving lives, and I will not be able to sleep well at night if somebody freezes on the streets of Edson because we were too cheap to actually do something to help these people. Years ago, they would be able to go into the post office. We had an apartment building where they used to hang out, and now that has been quote unquote cleaned up. They used to stay in trailers and other things. And they are, as Staff Sergeant Delisle has said, very resourceful in finding places, and often will bunk with people and are able to do that, but there are people that are just not able to do that. So anyway, I digress. I'm sorry, I'm very frustrated with this file because 5 years and we haven't seen significant change. We do need more mental health and addiction support. We have an area of our hospital that the government built that we spend money on each year that sits empty that could be certainly used for much better purposes like helping these individuals. So if there's any other questions, comments, or concerns, I think everybody had their say. We will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That motion is carried. And can I get a motion, please, that council authorize the funding for the Extreme Cold Emergency Warming Center to a maximum of $55,000 for the 2023-2024 year. Councillor Byer.
I so move.
All right. And I think we have all the information. I don't know if there's any other details. Go ahead, CEO Beveridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to provide an update with regards to the RFD as we were discussing where we were funding this from. I was reminded, yes, that we have $64,000 from the original shelter pod. So originally in 2021, I believe, that when money was provided to the shelter pods, and they weren't actually utilized because they received grants. The Edson Friendship Center did actually transfer that money back to the town of Edson in 2022. So that money also is available for this, just to be clear where the money would be. That was generally set aside for this purpose. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions on this? Any comments? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor, because that money was earmarked for that purpose and for this purpose, I'd be more in favor of seeing, albeit it all probably comes out in the wash anyways, I think I'd like to see it come out of that 64,000 if it's at all possible. I guess I would have to move to make an amendment to that. Nope. Okay, all right. So I would just like to see that that money come out of the 64,000 that was originally used for the shelter pods, but given back.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Byer.
Thanks. Through the chair to administration. So we've have an estimate of the 54,000, and that's 15 nights operations for 3 months total. Is that okay? So my concern is if we get a cold snap, which we probably will, and we end up going more than those 15 nights per month, does it have to come back to council to add on a few extra days? Or I'm kind of wondering towards hopefully the latter end. Maybe it doesn't have to happen at all. Hopefully it doesn't get that cold. Will this have to come back, or is it better to increase the amount that we have there?
Mr. Wagstaff.
We do have within the budget, even with the 50% in 2024 that was approved, a budget for homelessness, truth and reconciliation, diversity and inclusion. So part of that budget already approved can also go towards homelessness in a project like this.
Thank you. Any other further questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. And can I get a motion for adjournment? Councillor Taylor will make that motion because it's queued up.
Move to adjourn.
All right, thank you. All those in favor? Motion carried.